Alright, so now we're back with the second chapter of Mesechet Kinim. Just very quickly to review what happened in the first chapter. In the introduction, we're talking about the logic that's necessary to apply to situations in the real world with regard to halacha, best practices, advice. And in the first chapter, first we defined individuals, then we defined groups. Then we started talking about mixtures. What happens when an individual gets mixed up with a different kind of individual? What happens when individuals get mixed up with groups? What happens when groups get mixed up with groups where the two groups are of equal size? What happens when groups get mixed up with other groups so that they're not of equal size? And all of these cases of mixtures that we've dealt with in the first chapter were complete mixtures. Now the second chapter is devoted to a very special case of mixtures, partial mixtures. So let's say I have two cups and I pour part of one cup into the other cup. So not all of it. So I have what was in the original cup first, plus some of it from the second cup. And in the first one, I have some of it which was originally in that cup. So the second parak is dealing with partial mixtures, which is a special case of mixtures, whereas all of the kinds of mixtures that we had in the first chapter were of total mixtures. Just to remind you on the idea of halacha, even though we are always looking for the worst case scenario to set the boundary case of how far we can go without causing problems, because that's a necessary condition in best practices advice, we are not suggesting that that's the way the world works, because we know that that best case scenarios do occur. It is not that if you would advise someone to go into a casino, you don't advise them to go into a casino saying maybe you're going to be lucky today, which is a best case scenario. You advise them of how to go into the casino according to the ordinary rules of what are worst cases in the casino. And likewise, in every situation where halacha gives us advice, it tells us how to try to avoid worst case scenarios. Nevertheless, it happens that there are cases in life where combinations of events occur, which are actually best case scenarios. So the logic here is the logic for halacha. It should not be confused with the logic of all possible combinations of what seems to happen in the real world, nor does it get into the issue of a belief system that sometimes we may feel that best case scenarios occur more often than we would expect them to occur according to probability. Okay, so now let's go to the second Mishna here, the second chapter. It starts off with, the simplest cases of partial mixing. Ken stuma, stam, an ordinary nest, which is one where the woman has not said, this is my chatas and this is my ola. Rather, she said, these two birds are my obligatory nest. Sheparach mimena, and flies out from this ken stuma, from this nest, goes el avir, one of the birds into the air, into the world, flies away. Or, alternately, sheparach ben hametot, that the bird that flies out from the obligatory set of this woman flies into the group of birds which we have set aside to be left to die because we don't know how to use them correctly. Oh, a third case, shemet echad mehem, that one of the birds in the obligatory set of this woman has brought, one of those birds dies. Okay? Now, the solution that the Mishnah gives is yikach zug l'sheni. Go out and buy or capture another bird and make that the partner of the first bird. Why? If it's a ken stuma sheparach mimeno goes lavir, if it's an ordinary ken chova where nothing has been specified and one of them flies away into the world, we suggest that we cannot say that all of the birds in the world are now suspect. The world is an uncountably large number as far as we are concerned, and therefore the significance of the intention of this woman and this bird is cancelled. And therefore it does not create any restriction on the remaining bird. If it flies into the group of birds, Osha Parach ben Hametot, if it flies into the group of birds which are being left to die, we do not presume, well, there might be a chance that this bird may, just like he found a way into that group, he may find a way out of that group, and he may wind up back in the world, and he may wind up back whichever it is, he's not going to create a restriction on the remaining birds that we have from this woman. O shemet echad mehem, if one of the birds in the group of birds that this woman brings dies, we're not worried about the case that maybe this bird is suddenly going to revive and come back to life, and therefore he might get used as a chatas or an old on the mizbeach. For each of these three cases, we're not worried that any restriction is imposed on the remaining birds, and therefore we can go out and buy another bird and use it as a replacement for the first one to complete the obligatory set. Next case, which is the case of partial Mishna, not into creating no restriction, but into creating a restriction. Parach leben hakrevot. If the bird from the obligatory set flies into a different obligatory set, pasul uposel echad kenegdo. We say one of them cannot be used, and it creates an occurrence where another one cannot be used. Shahagozel haporeach posel uposel echad kenegdo. That the bird that has flew from one set to the other, really we would like to say is pasul, and it causes something to become pasul in juxtaposition to it. So let's look at the cases. Let's use these as diagrams. Let's say I have two birds and two birds. A bird flies from one group to the other. So if I were to use the remaining bird as a chatas, then in here I can only make olas, because I always have the chance that the one that I take from here is the ola of this group. Since this would be the case of ola shenita b'chova, which we had in the first chapter, an ola that gets mixed up with an obligatory set, and therefore ein kashrei the kaminian ola b'chova. You could only use half of the set of the chova, which is one bird here, one chatas, one ola. The other way to solve the problem is bird flies over. You say, okay, I'm not going to use the one remaining, and therefore there's no restriction on the one that flew in. If there's no restriction on the one that flew in, then I have an unrestricted bird flies into a ken chova. I can now take two birds out of these three, make one a chatas and one an ola. If both of those are from the original set, I'm okay. If one of them is from the original set and one of them is the one that flew in, I'm also okay. So in the case of parach that flies off from one group to another, I say, let's make one pasul, and let's leave one off that I'm not going to use in the other group. That's the pasul or posel echad kenegdo. I'm leaving one in the group that it flew out of, so that I'm not creating any restriction. And then in the group that I'm in, I can't use all of them, because if I try to use all of them, I might violate the original condition. So if I have an unrestricted bird and a pair, if I want to make two chatases and one ola, maybe I would wind up accidentally making the original group as two chatases, which would go against its conditions. Now, going on here to the second Mishnah of the third chapter is an example of how this works and what one might think which is incorrect, which the Mishnah is now going to correct for us. Keitzad, for example, Shtei nashim, lezu shtei kinim, or lezu shtei kinim. You have two women, one of them has two nests, and the other one has two nests. Parach mizu lezu, something flies from one to the other. Posel echad, b'chad ichaso. So you cancel one on each side. I don't know if it's that one or if it's this one, I don't know which one I've canceled, but I cancel one on each side. Okay? Parach echad Chazar, something flies back, either the original bird or something else. So when something flies from krevis to krevis, from the group that it flew out of, make one pasul, and from the group that it flew into, make one pasul. Of the remainder, here I have a chatas and ola, and here I have a chatas and ola. Fine. Now it says parach v'chazar, parach v'chazar. Now, if you thought the first Mishnah was telling you a rule, every time it flies out from krevis to krevis, from ones that I can use to ones that I can use, make one pasul, make one pasul. That's not exactly what it says. What it says is, do the best you can. Use the largest number that you can use without having any doubts. So the Mishnah says in this example, parach v'chazar, parach v'chazar, lo ifsi the klum, you haven't lost any more birds, because she'afilu hen mibarvot, even if they had all gotten mixed together, Ein pachot mishnayim. Because we had the case in the first parak. If there's two pair with two pair, half are kosher and half are puzzle. So if they all get mixed together, for sure I can use at least four. What are the at least four? If they're from the original one woman, two chatas and two ola. If they're from the other woman, two chatas and two ola. And if it's any combination in between, I'm not going to violate the condition. If I use three birds from here, two chatas and an ola, and one from here as an ola, I'm also okay. All of the combinations of using half work. So where we had in the first Mishnah, posed echad ve'echad kenegdo, that's an operational rule to try to show us the worst case. But if there's a better way of getting around it, such as mix them all together, that's what we're intended to use, and that's what the Mishnah explicitly tells us in the second Mishnah of this second chapter.